Good afternoon. It's a pleasure and a privilege to introduce to you again Dr. Mahmoud Jibril, the chairman of the Executive Committee of the National Transition Council of Libya. Dr. Jibril, we really recognize with great gratitude that you took the time to join us here and to share with us your ideas, your thinking about the historical events which happened in your country. And as I mentioned yesterday in my opening speech, we all should celebrate the rebirth of Libya. Now, you have explained in the plenary session and in some other occasions during the meeting already some of your thoughts about the future of Libya. I would like to have here maybe a more fundamental analysis. And my first question to you, Dr. Jibril, would be, when you look what's happened in Libya, is it an isolated case, or how do you see it? The intellectual, if I may say so, background. It's a historical event, as I just said, but is it a historical event focusing on Libya, or is it a historical event for the world?
Thank you very much. First of all, I'm glad to be here, and thank you for the invitation. I think what took place in Libya cannot be isolated from what's came to be known as the Arab Spring. It's a new wave, and my belief is that this is part of a new paradigm taking place because of the globalized trends which came into action in the late 80s. Now we started to see some results in the financial realm, as was the physical and financial crisis, 2008. Now at the cultural and social thing, new values started to develop. I always tell my colleagues that if you take a sample of 10,000 young people, 15 till 30 years old, for instance, you will be surprised that they listen to the same music, they get addressed the same way, and they support the same soccer players, and they listen. This is a new globalized age, whether they are coming from Africa, from Asia, from North America, from Europe, whatever, it doesn't matter. So there is a new value system because those young kids were exposed to a different socialization process from the one we got exposed to. Therefore, their dreams, their values, their behavior is completely different from ours. This is very important because if we want to address the concerns and the dreams and the values of those young kids, we should take this into consideration. Our old thinking is not suitable at all to address their concerns. As long as we ignore this fact, I expect that instability is going to continue. Turmoil is going to continue, and those young kids will keep coming to the streets. Our mission, I believe, to be mentors to those kids. We sit back, we help them develop their own programs, translate their own values, their own dreams into concrete programs. We help them to produce their own leadership and take things in their hand. As a matter of fact, I invited some of the Egyptian young people. I talked to Mr. Assam Sharaf, the Prime Minister. I talked to the Prime Minister of Tunisia to the same effect, and we are trying now to gather and convene the three states, the young kids from 3 states in one conference, trying to develop a common language between them.
This means in the old times, let's say, there was a two-class society and it was very much based on an ideological struggle. But today you have a conflict, if I may say so, between those post-Facebook and before Facebook. Now, you say those people are very impatient. How in a country like Libya, which has, if I'm not mistaken, about 70% of the population below the age of 30, how can you manage? I mean, what do you have to do in order to get those people on your side and to construct together your future?
Well, I think the first step is involvement. We have to involve those people. We don't act on their behalf. We don't perceive ourselves as we have a mandate over those people, that we know more than them. As a matter of fact, we will be surprised that in some cases, in most cases, they know much more than we do, because they are exposed day and night to the internet, they are exposed day and night to the satellite TV, while we expose ourselves less. If we take a sample of our age, 50s and 60s, you will discover that no more than 60% of us use computers, But when you come to those young kids, it's not unlikely at all that more than 90% use computers. You find a student knows more than his teacher. And this is empirically approved, through different studies, because they are day and night chatting all over the world. What I'm trying to say that this is a new political party, because it's convened all over time, 24 hours per day, because time difference between the continents, they chat with the United States, with China, with Africa, all over the place, It's not a party in the traditional sense where they have address, they have a building, the police cannot quote it, by the way, in those dictatorships. So this is a new phenomenon, and if we don't address it properly, I think a missed opportunity will be in place in the Middle East.
But when you look at those young people, do you feel that in essence they are, they are very demanding, but are they idealistic? Do you see a positive spirit?
Yes, I did. I had many opportunities to meet with those young people. Some of them are involved in some civil society organizations. They are brilliant. I think I was surprised, with the maturity of their thought, with their exposure to different ideas, It's completely opposite to our old thinking that we believe that those kids lack maturity, lack understanding. That's not true at all.
So it's a complete paradigm shift.
It is a paradigm
and Libya was in some way at, let's say, seismic point of such a paradigm shift.
That's true. I think if we can manage, to have stability and order taken care of quickly in Libya, I think Libya has a chance to produce a model of development unprecedented in the Middle East.
But when you take this paradigm shift, so under your assumption, the change which happened in Libya will practically spread around the world, even in countries which are not characterized by a terrible dictatorship as your country was, but it will spread around and we will have the same situation everywhere in the world.
I think this trend is unstoppable, I think, either in the Middle East or elsewhere, Technology is advancing so fast, I think by 2020, I think technology will take care of itself, where genetic growth will start emerging at that point. And this is a scary thing, But the gap between the human intellect and the technological advancing is widening badly, and this keeps us frustrated, The moment we get a new software, the moment that by the time we get trained it, we get surprised that a new generation of technology is coming, So we don't have the ability to comprehend and connect things together, And this is unprecedented in history, and it's going to cause some problems in the future.
Dr. Jibril, I argued in an editorial that the technological revolution which is taking place is different from what we are used to, because old technology revolution changed the way how we did things. But the new for example, a steam engine, but the new revolution is changing our identity. And I think most people have not yet recognized that we have now an identity-changing technological revolution in place. And it's actually not only the internet and digital interaction, but we will have to see a reinforcement of this type of technological revolution with gene technology, stem cell technology, and so on, which will alter ourselves and which will create a completely new dimension in the world. Would you agree?
I agree with that. As a matter of fact, I remember that Mr. Kurzweil, in too many press conferences, warned the world and humanity that we are coming to the conversion of technology by the year 2023. And that would be very scary, where the logic of technology will supersede the human logic, technology will dominate the brain of human beings, and that's a very scary thing. The most devastating implication for those technological advances was the results of those technological advances for those starving continents and countries. My argument is that, Professor Schwab, is that always we have this triangle between population, wealth, and technology, or know-how or knowledge. The moment we have know-how and population, we can create wealth. But the moment we have population and wealth only without knowledge, we're going to waste wealth. The first model, we have Singapore, we have Israel, we have Ireland, What matters is that if technology is associated with the human beings for the sake of the human beings, now most of the world economy is shifting towards the service economy, this virtual economy. Probably this was one of the grassroots reasons, for the financial crisis that took place. The speed is too fast. Now we are becoming to a paradigm where wealth is creating wealth. In the past, it was wealth creating production, whether agriculture, whether industrial. We find jobs for people. Now, with this virtual paradigm, it's wealth creating wealth, whether it's in the stock market, and the time difference is making it worse. For instance, Bill Gates in New York can push a button of his laptop and taking an opportunity in taking use of some opportunities in China, for instance. And because of the time difference, he can do it again in a different continent without even interference from any bank. The structure of our banks, which were resulted from the treaty of agreement of Bretton Woods in 1947, are completely irrelevant to today's world. So I think the question of speed is a problem, but it gives a chance to small country to capitalize on that. Small is beautiful today. They can capitalize on this.
And young people can capitalize on it.
Truly.
We also have to move away from the traditional definition of employment to self-employment, entrepreneurship.
That's true.
And that can create hope even for a poor country, because it can leapfrog if it captures this entrepreneurial spirit.
I think this is very important. I can expect in the future some inter-countries projects where kids virtually, can combine their efforts for one project. Maybe the center is somewhere in Europe, but who took part in that project is spread all over the world. The problem with what I'm saying is that the population growth is exponential. If we have today the world population is around 6,700,000,000, it's going to be by 2050 something like 9.5 billion. Africa in particular, which is, I think, the fate of the economy of the world will rest with Africa. Africa today is 900,000,075. By 2025, it's going to be 1,258,000,000. But by 2050, it's going to be approaching 2 billion, while Europe is shrinking. Europe by 2050 is going to be less 72 million people. Know-how is in Europe, and poverty is spreading in Africa. Africa by 2050 will have 359 young people in the age from 15 to 39 marching north. So there is a problem. And here where I see a real opportunity for Libya to be a real hub to transform the skills of those Africans and export them to Europe, where they can fit the needs of the European economy. So I think Libya in the future is fitted to play a very cardinal, very pioneering role to serve not the interests of Libya, but the interests of the European economy in particular.
Dr. Jibril, I think it was very important to put the Libyan situation into a general context. But coming back to Libya for a moment, or to conclude this session, let me ask you, what do you see as the most positive scenario? I know you have been a professor for strategic planning, as I have been, so we like to speak in terms of scenarii. What is your most, let's start with the most pessimistic scenario, and then let's end with the most optimistic scenario. And let's take a time horizon of 3 to 5 years.
Well, the most pessimistic, the worst case scenario is that we fail as Libyans or as TNC or executive office to collect arms from the streets. Tribalism surfaces again and try to play havoc in the social fabric of our countries. Then those will be a serious and very grave impediments to those visionary statements I just made. This is the most, and this might result in anything that you can expect, civil strife. At least those visionary developmental scenario will be postponed for a while. And I don't think the Libyans, with their knowledge, with their awareness, after those 42 years of agony and suppression, the moment they think of those 42 years, they will stop from anything that might impede those developmental ambitions.
And you are most optimistic?
My most optimistic is that we'll get to business immediately, that stability and order will be done in a record time. There will be a national consensus about a national vision of development. By the way, we had developed one in 2025 called Vision 2025 for Libya, which is mixed modeling and scenario planning together. We came with 3 different scenarios. I hope that this scenario prevails in the near future.
My last question is, you went through an extraordinary time. I mean, being at the head of the executive committee of the Transition Council, the last weeks, I mean, we can only imagine what pressures were on your shoulders. And if you would share the experience you have taken out of those months, if you would share your experience with the audience, what did you learn out of this here in terms of leadership?
Well, first of all, I would admit that those young Libyans, kept surprising me every time. I remember a time when we were squeezed badly by the international community, asking us for a middle way because there was a military stalemate on the ground, and everybody was pushing, try to accept a middle way solution, some sort of compromise with the regime. It was for those young kids, who proved that everybody was wrong. They took things in their hand. I was trying to buy time. At that time, Tripoli uprising was about 2 weeks away. It was for those kids, that they started rolling, a new spirit all of a sudden came out, and they started rolling back the military machine of Gaddafi. And everybody was surprised, including we at the TNC or the executive office. So I would really want to salute those young kids, for the heroic and courageous activities that took place on the ground that changed the whole picture. The other thing, my own humble opinion, I was and still the head of what's called the executive office. There were some people on the ground fighting, and I was giving or devoting most of my time to the political side, how to get recognition of this TNC. And I was racing with time, from country to country. Sometimes the flights took me 22.5 hours continuously, for instance, from Beijing till Durban, South Africa. my understanding was if I managed to get the legitimacy for the TNC, even if the battle on the ground is not over yet, then the case is over, you know. If we manage with my colleagues to seat the TNC in the seat of Libya and the United Nations, then the case is over. And this is what happened, by the way. TNC was seated in the United Nations in September 16th, while the liberation of Tripoli and the liberation of the total country just took place 3 days ago, you know, so, or 4 days ago. So it was not an easy task without money, without arms, without, but there was a real will, a strong will, and there is the real support was from those young people on the ground, spilling their blood, you know, for the sake of their own country. So I cannot resist but salute their heroism and those who passed away, you know, for the sake of their own country.
Dr. Jibril, we should also pay tribute to you, to your leadership. I would say collaborative leadership with the young people.
Thank you.
And we wish you personally, and we wish the Libyan people all the best, and we hope that all the aspirations will be fulfilled in a not too far, I underline, not too far future. And you can count certainly on the support of many here in the room and on the support of the World Economic Forum.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Schwab.